Average first innings score at the Sydney Cricket Ground is 165. What do India need to score to be able to make it 1-1? 165. 164 was what Australia finished with for the loss of 6 wickets. It was a strange old innings. In the first 4 or 5 overs, they looked as if they were on course for 180. Then suddenly India pulled it back and it looked like Australia wouldn't get past 145 perhaps. But then 57 runs of the last 30 deliveries meant that Australia would get to a respectable and, as we could see, an average total at the SCG. A couple of gentlemen here who were very, very close to that final total as far as predictions went, but I'll go to the man who was 1 run away. 163, 164.
I shall work harder next time and get exactly the number that is going to be the final score. But you know what I'm more interested in, Gautam? You said average first inning score is 165. I'm actually more keen to know how many times that score is being chased down because India will have to score 165, but then a good job done. This pitch was good enough to score 180. So if you restrict the opposition for 164, I think Indian camp should be the happier camp of the two.
They elected to bat first, and in the first 4 or 5 overs, it looked like 180 was on the cards. But then will India be disappointed with their last 5 overs?
It was, for me, as I said, this inning was like a sine curve. So first the Australians, 68 in the first 8 overs, the first 8.5 overs, they're doing fantastically. Suddenly Indians come back, take it all the way down. But what was really, for me, was a bit disappointing was from 130 to 160, basically in 16 balls, they got 32 runs. Okay, at a time when Coulter-Nile was batting, and that's really, at that point in time, you'd think the Indian bowling would have done a better job of it. You know, they're 6 down. They weren't 3 down or 4 down. Okay, there was one set batsman. Stoinis was more set on one side. But Coulter-Nile and them plundering 30-odd runs after the kind of wickets we had got was a bit disappointing. I mean, 164 is not a bad total for India, but I think we could have got it down to about 150.
And that's the irony. The way the Australian batting overall has looked, Coulter-Nile has been their best batsman. You know, that's the most consistent.
Right. You know, that's the other thing. So we were listening to the commentators that they bat deep. Yes, India would also bat deep if you start putting Bhuvneshwar Kumar and Kuldeep Yadav at 5 or 6. So you had Stoinis batting at the number that he's batting. Chris Lynn batting at the number that he is batted. So you obviously know that even if it says 5 down, it's not really 5 down. They still have enough firepower in their batting department to inflict damage, and therefore I'd just slightly disagree, maybe have a slightly different opinion that you do concede these kind of runs in a T20 game. If he doesn't hit you, somebody else will, that's for sure. And it's not that India bowled poorly. Bhuvneshwar Kumar or Jasprit Bumrah, they didn't bowl really badly in those last few overs to concede so many runs. Khalil is the only perhaps the weakling. Everybody else, and even then he also went for 35. The other thing is that Bhuvi also bowled a couple of overs in the death overs, and therefore they look almost similar, but obviously they're not. Bumrah once again looks more expensive, but then he bowled the tougher overs. Therefore these scorecards, they're very, very misleading because it doesn't tell you the phase in which the bowlers operated. Absolutely. And how many overs they bowled when how many wickets were down. So I think Khalil, in my opinion, is the weakest link in this bowling department.
Interesting that Aakash should say that, because I think in this era where we look at statistics and we want to look at the numbers behind the numbers, is there a way almost to find a device where you can break down your bowling figures based on where you bowled and who you bowled to?
I completely agree. In fact, infographics today, the level at which it is, you can. I mean, I would call it, say, suppose you say these are hot overs, these are hotter overs, tougher overs to bowl. I'm sure you can do that. I'm sure you can delineate, because exactly that. I mean, Jasprit Bumrah was still our best bowler.
Exactly, that's the point.
Jasprit, he was definitely our best bowler, but maybe between Kuldeep and Jasprit, it's a close competition. But the other one, Kunal Pandya, interesting. You know, he got a lot of wickets, but at no time did he look as if he was bowling brilliantly or he had the opposition in knots. Again, he went for about how much? 13 in his last over. So he was
9.5 an over.
9.5 an over. And right at the end, he gave away 13 just when, you know.
9.5 an over, you get away with it in T20 cricket because you're looking at 160, 170. Yes, par for the course on most pitches. But then where those 9.5 runs an over are coming is critical. He bowled all his overs, Krunal. None in the power play, none in the death overs. So if you're bowling only the middle overs, and therefore, as Joy rightly actually said, that Bumrah was India's best bowler, because he bowled the tougher overs. He was the one who bowled the 6th over of the power play overs. Oh, that's the toughest to bowl. First is the easiest to bowl. And then to bowl the last over of a T20 innings when you're bowling first. 20th is the toughest over to bowl, 19th is when you're actually defending a total. So these permutation combinations must be taken into account before judging a certain player or a certain performance.
Since we were using parallels from other sports and we talked about football and basketball, etc., I have one from tennis which I think is very, very valid here. And they break it down really nicely. You talk about playing the big points better, and you have a player, a big server who serves 40 aces in a game. But if of those 40 aces, many of them have come at 40 love, those don't really count. It's when you serve those aces at love 40 down, get yourself out of a hole, those count as double the value and in a tiebreak.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, the interesting thing is tennis, of course, takes it to a different extreme, because in tennis, you can actually win much more points than the other guy and lose a match. It's very easy to do that. You could win, 7-6, 7-6, 7-6 and lose 6-0, 6-0, and you would have won, and the other guy would have won a lot more sets, but you have won the match. And so tennis is an interesting example of that. In cricket, it's closer, but infographics, I think the one thing that I have to say which really bothers me is that these cricket scorecards look the same for the last 20 years in which I've been working in cricket.
It should not be the case.
It shouldn't be the case. No other sport is the same.
Particularly in an evolved format of the game. Now that you've gone from Test cricket to T20 cricket, and in T20 cricket these have such different interpretations. You already know slight tweaks have come, where you're talking about career statistics showing you a strike rate over an average, which is more valid in T20 cricket. But I think you need to go further.
Even that is not valid. Even strike rate is not telling you the picture. That's the funny bit about these strike rates and how they actually, whether they are telling you the exact thing that you want to know.
But a step in the right direction?
It is a step in the right direction, but a lot still needs to be done, and not just T20, it needs to be done everywhere, across board, because, okay, let's talk about Test cricket, for example. India will be playing a Test match in Perth. India versus Australia at Perth, you've got Hazelwood, Stark and Cummins bowling at you. You score a century there, and you score a century at Rajkot against West Indies. They're still the same centuries, aren't they? Test centuries. But are they the same? No, they're not. So you need to have some device which tells you just an impression, just by looking at the numbers. Oh, these are relevant numbers. These are better numbers. These may not be as relevant or as great.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should take it forward even to career statistics when you're talking about someone making 7,000 runs. How many of those runs have come where? And as you said, whether it's a century or just runs per se, makes a lot of sense.
Correct.
Yeah, I think the whole, given that it's an increasingly visually informative age, I think there's a lot to be done, and there are many ways to represent it. I just don't think we've put our best minds to it as yet, and there's a lot to be done out there.
It'll happen, 100%.
Yep, it will happen. Well, that's the fascinating part of this game. Even when you're talking about a T20 game, it can lead you into these discussions which are actually relevant. But in terms of relevance for the Indian team, yes, we're just looking at the numbers, the scores, but what about the performance in the field? Aakash and I briefly discussed the Indian fielding. 6 catches dropped, few misfields over there. There again, leading in from that discussion we were talking about earlier, you talk about those misfields and the drop catches, it's almost runs that should go against you as a player in the context of that game.
In fact, yeah, having a plus minus as a player.
Yeah, they tried it.
They tried it, they didn't do very well at it, and it's important to do, and this is a very average Indian fielding side, not the kind of fielding side we've been used to in the last 3, 4, 5 years, for whatever reasons, whether Manish Pandey not playing, quite a few players not playing. Other than Virat and all, there are not too many standouts there in the Indian fielding side anymore. Secondly, and I think it is costing India, I think we've taken a deliberate decision to go with the Rishabh Pant as your first wicket keeper as opposed to Karthik. Obviously, the thought also might be he'll be playing the Test series, he'll be around for a while. Let's give him a chance to blood him. If we don't give him the confidence now, how is he going to keep in the Test matches? But
and Karthik is also, I think, a better fielder. So when you're talking about Australian grounds, who's going to field at the deep? Though not Karthik, I'm not saying that Karthik is the best choice because he doesn't have the arm. When you're throwing from 70 meters away, you need the arm. He doesn't have the arm. In fact, if you were to go by, just go player by player, and you'll actually struggle. Shikhar Dhawan is not the same fielder anymore. Rohit Sharma is not the same fielder anymore. He was gun fielder at one stage, not that. There is Virat Kohli, but then who else? Dinesh Karthik, not in the deep. Rishabh Pant, a keeper, an average wicket keeper at this point in time, work in progress.
You look at the Aakash, you're very kind.
I'm from Delhi, comes from my stable. We are from the same club.
Sonnet boy.
Yes, he is a sonnet boy. And then you look at the bowlers. Bhuvneshwar Kumar, safe, not great. Bumrah, though he affected a very good run out today, I thought that saved at least 5, 7, 10 runs for India, because that was Chris Lynn at the other end. And Kuldeep Yadav, Chahal, even if he were to play, Chahal drops quite a few. So this fielding unit, Joy has put it absolutely right, that it's not the best that we have fielded.
Yeah, and since you mentioned Chahal, that might just be an X factor that perhaps keeps him out of the side. One is, of course, his batting or lack of batting, and maybe his fielding. But overall, if you had to look at it, I mean, with the Suresh Rainas of the world, who would provide you so much, you'd have a +7 in his column probably every single time, even when he was maybe -5 with the bat.
I think that's what's interesting is why is it happening, and I think it's a peculiar circumstance of this team, because in average Indian fielding has improved dramatically over the last 3, 4, 5, 7 years. You know, better pitches, people are not scared of diving. You see, the old cricketers used to have rock hard pitches in domestic games. Nobody would dive because you'd just break an ankle or something. So they've got the circumstances. We are better as a fielding unit, definitely are. But some peculiar set of circumstances has made this particular side not the greatest fielding side. Also, we got, as I said, one and two are aging. You know, Dhawan and Rohit are not the fielders they used to be.
So you reckon, like for like, this particular series, Australia have a better fielding unit?
They do seem to have a slightly more athletic fielding unit for sure, and they have not dropped as many catches. Well, then they have not also fielded for 20 overs. We have fielded a little more, so we'll get to know, because we didn't get too bad at all in the second T20I.
On that subject, if we are assessing this particular run chase, how much of it will be a factor of the number of overs India have batted so far?
It is a factor, because see, all said and done, we talk about Sydney. Sydney is very much like India, the best batting surface. It's slow in nature, helps the spinners, but it's still Sydney. Like we said, that Brisbane is still Brisbane, so bounce pace, they're used to it. We still take time to get to acquaint ourselves to the bounce and the pace. So it is definitely a factor. A lot of people haven't really got their eye in. Someone like Virat hasn't really scored anything thus far, because batted only once. Pant threw his wicket away, that will be playing on his mind. Rohit Sharma missed out, that's another factor. So it does make a difference, and there is a certain Mitchell Starc in the opposition. So I don't think 164 is that bad a score when you just look at it in the context of this game, and where and how much India has batted, or rather hasn't batted on this tour thus far.
So really, if you look at it from that point of view, Shikhar Dhawan's the only one who can walk out there and say, I can hit the ground running.
Correct. I've got runs on the board. I've got confidence in this particular series.
However, and Aakash's favourite, Dinesh Karthik. 30 of 13 balls, yes. He'll be raring to even push up the order.
He'll be raring to go, and I hope if he has to go out, if he's actually been pushed up the order. Otherwise, if he's again asked to do the same thing that he was trying to achieve in Brisbane, then we have a problem.
Mitchell Starc coming back for his second spell.
Then we have a problem on our hands. It won't be Marcus Stoinis bowling the 15th or the 18th or the 20th.
They'll have learned their lesson for sure. We've talked about mistakes. We've talked about Australia today experimenting with their batting order, holding Chris Lynn back, sending up McDermott, sending up Carey. But I'm not sure they're going to be playing too much around with their bowlers. Though, unlike India, they do have that 6th bowling option.
They have that extra bowling option. They have a few more options, but see, again, it comes down in India again back to our top 3. Correct. Our top 3 do it. It doesn't matter.
Who are the top 3? Is it
I'm assuming Virat is the top 3. I am assuming Virat is top 3. Back to that same discussion, but yeah, if those 3 guys deliver for us, we'll do fine. If they don't, it's going to be rather uphill, like the Sydney Hill, which no longer there, but uphill.
Yeah, more like the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the number of steps you have to climb to get up to the top.
He's been there 6 times, so obviously.
Yes, I have a gold certificate.
He had to put it
I know, that is why he mentioned, and he was looking at me, come on Delhi wala, say something. So I said, okay.
Thank you. I put it up there and he drove it through. Thank you.
Correct.
But overall, just to sum up, do you think India have more than an even chance? Because you like your percentages.
Slightly more. So if I were to pick my side, I'll say 55% India, 45% Australia. Not ruling them out completely, but then 165 on this surface with the top 3 or the top 4, whichever way it turns out to be in the end. I'd say India will start as marginal favourites.
You also feel slightly under par that score?
I feel, yeah, it's like, I feel like those old Hindi films used to be, na, beta pass ho gaya. 45 used to be pass in our time. I think 45 Australia, 55 India. I'd go that way.
Fair enough, fair enough. Pass mark. I'm not going to disagree on that one. With my track record in the series, I'll stick to asking the questions from now on. I think the total I've had, even with these shortened games, I'm about 45 runs behind overall in terms of predictions. So I won't even go there anymore. Let's stick to 55-45. Let all the panel agree for a change. It's going to be the top three who we'll rely on. We expect Virat Kohli to be on the top three, but will the M factor, the Mitchell Starc factor, play a part with Mrs. Starc? I'll call her Mrs. Starc for the moment, having been man of the series or player of, man, did I say man? Player of the tournament in the ICC World T20. That's all for now. We'll be back again, Cricbuzz Combox, and then a wrap of the entire series, this being India's last limited overs game for 2018.